I'm Chrissy, and I plan on reading this book to you. It's called Create Dangerously by Albert Camus. I picked it up in a bus stop when I went to go and see an ancient tree, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's only 52 pages, I think it is, and I really want to read it because I think that it really, really helps with understanding the role of a creator, the role of an artist, the role of a rebel, the role of that is in all of us. Certainly at the minute, with the world as it is. And I just thought that it was so beautifully written and so well written and explained it, and everything just sunk in with myself, that I thought I'd share it with you, in my attempt to do my bit, in my attempt to share what I read, what I learn from, and also what resonates with me. I don't quite know what to call this other than I love reading, and I love sharing. I certainly love sharing things that I know have helped myself. And they say that obviously, you know, we're not supposed to keep this all to ourselves, we're supposed to share it. And also I wanted to kind of be with you too. There's too much doing in this world nowadays as well, and not enough being, not enough consciousness before we start doing things. So yeah, I'm going to read it to you. There might be pauses for me to be able to breathe, because I need to breathe. I'm hoping that it's going to be a calm space for you to just listen while you're having a cup of tea, or if you're watching or whatever. But I just felt like I wanted to share certainly this book with you, and this, The Rebel, by the same author. I'm just going to read it to you. Create dangerously. Get comfortable. Create dangerously. An Oriental wise man always used to ask the divinity in his prayers to be so kind as to spare him from living in an interesting era. As we're not wise, the divinity has not spared us, and we are living in an interesting era. In any case, our era forces us to take an interest in it. The writers of today know this. If they speak up, they are criticised and attacked. If they become modest and keep silent, they are vociferously blamed for their silence. In the midst of such din, the writer cannot hope to remain aloof in order to pursue the reflections and images that are dear to him. Until the present moment, remaining aloof has always been possible in history. When someone did not approve, he could always keep silent or talk of something else. Today everything is changed, and even silence has dangerous implications. The moment that abstaining from choice is itself looked upon as a choice, and punished or praised as such, the artist is willy-nilly impressed into service. Impressed seems to me a more accurate term in this connection than committed. Instead of signing up, indeed, for voluntary service, the artist does his compulsory service. Every artist today is embarked on a contemporary slave gallery. He has to resign himself to this, even if he considers that the gallery reeks of its past, that the slave drivers are really too numerous, and in addition, that the steering is badly handled. We are on the high seas. The artist, like everyone else, must bend to his oar without dying, if possible. In other words, go on living and creating. To tell the truth, it's not easy, and I can understand why artists regret their former comfort. The change is somewhat cruel. Indeed, history's amphitheatre has always contained the martyr and the lion. The former relied on eternal consolations, and the latter on raw historical meat. But until now, the artist was on the sidelines. He used to sing purposefully for his own sake, or at best to encourage the martyr and make the lion forget his appetite. But now the artist is in the amphitheatre. Of necessity, his voice is not quite the same. It is nearly not so firm. It is easy to see all that art can lose from such a constant obligation. Ease to begin with, and that divine liberty so apparent in the work of Mozart. It is easier to understand why our works of art have a drawn, set look and why they collapse so suddenly. It is so obvious why we have more journalists than creative writers, more Boy Scouts of painting than Cézannes, and why sentimental tales or detective novels have taken the place of War and Peace or the Charterhouse of Parma. Of course, one can always meet that state of things with humanistic elimination and become what Stephen Trofimovich in The Possessed insists upon being, a living reproach. One can also have, like him, attacks of patriotic melancholy, but such melancholy in no way changes reality. It is better, in my opinion, to give the era its due, since it demands this so vigorously, and calmly admit that the period of the reverent master, of the artist with the camellia in his buttonhole, of the armchair genius is over. To create today is to create dangerously. Any publication is an act, and that act exposes one to the passions of an age that forgives nothing. Hence the question is not to find out if this is or is not prejudicial to art. The question for all those who cannot live without art, and what it signifies is merely to find out how, among the police forces of so many ideologies, how many churches, what solitude, the strange liberty of creation is possible. It is not enough to say in this regard that art is threatened by the powers of the state. If that were true, the problem would be simple. The artist fights or capitulates. The problem is more complex, more serious too, as soon as it becomes apparent that the battle is waged within the artist himself. The hatred for art, of which our society provides such fine examples, is so effective today only because it is kept alive by artists themselves. The doubt felt by the artist who precedes us concerns their own talent. The doubt felt by artists of today concerns the necessity of their art, hence their very existence. Racine in 1957 would make excuses for writing Berenice when he might have been fighting to defend the Edict of Nantes. That questioning of art by the artist has many reasons, and only the loftiest need be considered. Among the best explanations is the feeling the contemporary artist has of lying or indulging in useless words if he pays no attention to history's woes. What characterises our time, indeed, is the way the masses and their wretched condition have burst upon contemporary sensibilities. We now know they exist, whereas we once had tendency to forget them, and if we're more aware, it is not because our aristocracy, artistic or otherwise, has become better. No, have no fear. It is because the masses have become stronger and keep people from forgetting them. There are still other reasons, and some of them less noble, for this surrender of the artist. But whatever those reasons may be, they all work towards the same end, to discourage free creation by undermining its basic principle, the creator's faith in himself. A man's obedience to his own genius, Emerson said magnificently, is faith in its purest form. And another American writer of the 19th century added, So long as a man is faithful to himself, everything is in his favour. Government, society, the very sun, moon and stars. Such amazing optimism seems dead today. In most cases, the artist is ashamed of himself and his privileges, if he has any. He must first of all answer the question he has put to himself: is art a deceptive luxury? The first straightforward reply is this: on occasion, art may be a deceptive luxury. On the poop deck of slave galleries, it is possible at any time and place, as we know, to sing of the constellations whilst the convicts bend over the oars and exhaust themselves in the hold. It is always possible to record the social conversation that takes place on the benches of the amphitheatre whilst the lion is crunching the victim. And it is very hard to make any objections to the art that has known such success in the past. But things have changed somewhat, and the number of convicts and martyrs has increased amazingly over the surface of the globe. In the face of so much suffering, if art insists on being a luxury, it will also be a lie. Of what could art speak, indeed, if it adapts itself to what the majority of our society wants? Art will be meaningless, a meaningless recreation. If it blindly rejects that society, if the artist makes up his mind to take refuge in his dream, art will express nothing but a negation. In this way, we shall have the production of entertainers or formal grammarians. And in both cases, this leads to an art cut off from living reality. For about a century, we've been living in a society that is not even the society of money. In brackets, gold can arouse carnal passions, but that of abstract money, abstract symbols of money. The society of merchants can be defined as a society which things disappear in favour of signs. When a ruling class measures its fortunes not by the acre of land or the ingot of gold, but by the number of figures correspondingly, ideally to a certain number of exchange operations, it thereby condemns itself to setting a certain kind of humbug at the centre of its experience and its universe. A society founded on signs is, in essence, an artificial society, in which man's carnal truth is handled as something artificial. There is no reason for being surprised that such a society, as its religion, a moral code of formal principles, and that it inscribes the words liberty and equality on prisons as well as on its temples of finance. However, words cannot be prostituted with impunity. The most misrepresented value today is certainly the value of liberty. Good minds, in brackets, I have always thought there were two kinds of intelligence: intelligent intelligence and stupid intelligence. Close bracket. They teach that it is but an obstacle on the path of true progress, but such solemn stupidities are uttered because for 100 years a society of merchants made an exclusive and unilateral use of liberty, looking upon it as a right rather than a duty, and did not fear to use an ideal liberty as often as it could to justify a very real oppression. As a result, is there anything surprising in the fact that such a society asked art to be not an instrument of liberation, but an inconsequential exercise and a mere entertainment? Consequently, a fashionable society in which all troubles were money troubles and all worries were sentimental worries was satisfied for decades with its society novelists and with the most futile art in the world, the one about which Oscar Wilde, thinking of himself before he knew prison, said that the greatest of all vices was superficiality. In this way, the manufacturers of art, in brackets I did not say the artists, of middle-class Europe before and after 1900s accepted irresponsibility because responsibility presupposed a painful break with their society. From that period we get the theory of art for art's sake, which is merely a voicing of that irresponsibility. Art for art's sake, the entertainment of a solitary artist, is indeed the artificial art of a fictitious and self-absorbed society. The logical result of such a theory is the art of little cliques, or the purely formal art fed on affections and abstractions, and ending in the destruction of all reality. In this way, a few works charm a few individuals, while many coarse inventions corrupt many others. Finally, art takes shape outside of society and cuts itself off from its living roots. Gradually, the artist, even if he is celebrated, is alone, or at least is known to his nation only through the intermediary of the popular press or radio, which will provide a convenient and simplified idea of him. The more art specialises, in fact, the more necessary popularisation becomes. In this way, millions of people will have the feeling of knowing this, or that great artist of our time, because they've learnt from the newspapers that he raised canaries or that he never stays married more than 6 months. The greatest renown today consists in being admired or hated without being read, having been read. Any artist who goes in for being famous in our society must know that it is not he who will become famous, but someone else under his name, someone who will eventually escape him and perhaps someday will kill the true artist in him. Consequently, there is nothing surprising in the fact that almost everything worthwhile created in the mercantile Europe of the 19th and 20th centuries, in literature, for instance, was raised up against the society of its time. It may be said that until almost the time of the French Revolution, current literature was in the main a literature of consent. From the moment when the middle class society, a result of the revolution, became stabilised, a literature of revolt developed instead. Official values were negated, in France for example, either by the bearers of revolutionary values, from the Romantics to Rimbaud, or the maintainers of aristocratic values, of whom Vigny and Balzac are good examples. In both cases, the masses and the aristocracy, the two sources of all civilization, took their stand against the artificial society of their time. But this negation maintained so long that it is now rigid, it has become artificial too, and leads to another sort of sterility. The theme of the exceptional poet born into a mercantile society was hardened into presumption that one can be a great artist only against the society of one's time. Whatever it may be,